Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, and fellow citizens, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization. This podcast and everything our organization does, from our really good website at wethepeopleconvention.org, our text messages, our emails, our donations to other conservative groups are all paid for by the generous donations of the donors to the We the People Convention, who've been supporting our efforts to protect and defend individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Going on 16 years now. The first Tea Party meeting I ever attended was on July 11th, 2009. So now we're coming up to 16 years. And we thank those who've supported this effort, which has had a major impact on our nation and has resulted in what I hope you had, which is an incredible Independence Day on July 4th yesterday and this Independence Day weekend, because we certainly have so much to be excited about. I hope that you had a great day on July 4th with your family, friends, and fellow citizens. We went to a parade. I don't know if you noticed, but boy, there sure seemed to be a heck of a lot more fireworks this year than there had been in the last few years. Maybe that indicates two things. Perhaps that the economy is getting better so that people could afford to buy fireworks, but also, just a desire to celebrate our freedom and our liberty and our prosperity, which has been so hard earned and hard defended, as you and I know, in recent years, where we've had to put a lot of our blood, sweat, tears, and money into trying to keep what our founding fathers gave us. I hope you had a fantastic 4th of July, and I hope you're going to continue this week. We've got, some events we're going to today, and it's just, we're the luckiest people in the history of the world. That's just the bottom line. You can argue, the details, but it's just a fact. The reason millions of people want to break into our country and want to come here is because there's never been anything like it. But as we will discuss here in this podcast, there are dangers, there are concerns, there are problems that you and I are going to have to face, whether we like it or not, and we're going to have to address. But I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. One of the things that is surprising to me is that in the early days, I felt like, geez, maybe I should even do a podcast on holidays like Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, Memorial weekend, whatever, because, you're so busy doing things and you don't have time to watch. The funny part is that I've learned that the viewership of this podcast is bigger on holidays than it is regularly. And I think that's because your schedule is interrupted. Yeah, you have a lot of events to do, but you also have some downtime you don't usually have. And so I want to, thank you for taking your time to watch this podcast, particularly those of you who are new to this podcast, who we have probably doubled our viewership in the last month. I learned from one of our relatives just the other day, one of our younger relatives, that one of the clips we put on TikTok, for God's sake, had over 3,600 views. I had no idea. We are having an impact with our new efforts that you are funding to get more people to watch this show. And hopefully, there are many of you who are joining us for the first time, and I want to welcome you, because what you're going to get here is truth. You're going to get perspective. You're going to get information that you can actually use and apply to make your life better, your family's life better, your community better. Because that's what we're about. That's what Americans are about, right? Because it's government of the people, by the people, for the people, which means we're participants, we're not spectators. So welcome to all of you who are new, but mostly welcome to all of you who are old like me, who've been with us for such a long time. We love you guys, we appreciate you, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all you've done to make this happen and allow us to achieve the spectacular, I would say, results we've achieved. It's all about we the people. And you are now watching this podcast because you care. So thank you for joining us. You know, while we're celebrating Independence Day, this poll came out and it was a big deal and everybody wanted to talk about it, you know, about pride in America. And Gallop poll says 36% of Democrats versus 92% of Republicans are proud to be an American. And you know, the thing I want to point out by this poll, and if you're not watching, if you're listening, I'll describe the chart. It basically goes from 2001 to 2025, and it shows by party, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, how proud you are to be an American. In 2001, 90% of Republicans were proud, 87% of Democrats, and 84% of Independents were proud to be an American. What's interesting is that over all those years, it's gone down except for Republicans. While it was 90% in 2001 of Republicans being proud, in 2025, it's 92%. It didn't matter who was president. It didn't matter. This is the Obama years. This is the Biden years. It dips a little bit, but we're proud to be Americans because we believe in America. We're not ideologues. We don't believe in a person, despite the claims that, oh, Trumpism is a cult and we just, you know, adore Donald Trump. No, we appreciate Donald Trump for believing in what we believe in and for acting to deliver that. The problem, as you saw on that chart, is that, you know, Democrats went from 87% in 2001 to 36%. And it's dropped from like over 50% when Biden was president down to 36%. Okay? They don't believe in America. They don't even understand what America is. That's what that chart proves to you. Okay? They don't even understand what America is. They don't understand our founding documents. They don't understand, you know, the principles that are the core to what makes this the best form of government ever created on this earth. And we're going to talk about that. But the bottom line is the majority of Americans are still proud, but you should be a lot prouder. If you're not, you're just uninformed. You're just ignorant. And that's, you know, because if any kind of a you know, honest look in comparison, you know, where would you move? You know, say to those Democrats, okay, go where it's better. You know, Rosie O'Donnell says, I'm moving to Ireland. You think Ireland's better? They're censoring people for putting memes on, you know, their social media for criticizing Muslims. Think that's better? Yeah, there is no place better. You need to keep talking about that. You need to keep proving that because that's the truth. So we'll move on because I said last week, what a week to be an American. As the headline to our podcast, because of what Trump accomplished with, you know, not only, you know, destroying the nuclear weapons in Iran, but then announcing a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, and then, you know, what he did with the Congo and a 30-year war, and, you know, it just was a great week last week. Yeah, this week was as good, if not better. So, you know, here we are. You know, the big, beautiful bill is the key. It is what it embodies what you and I voted for last November. It gives Donald Trump the money, that the organizational structure necessary to deport 12 million illegals. We didn't have the money in ICE. We didn't have the detention centers. Heck, we didn't even have the money to finish building the wall. And so what happened is, you know, the big story to start the week was the Senate passes the big, beautiful bill. Now it moves to the House for final debate. And as you know, witnessed, and if you get our emails and text messages, it was ugly. Okay, it was ugly. Senate Republicans narrowly, yeah, you can say that again, passed Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill Tuesday, taking a significant step toward the president's goal of signing the legislation later this week. The vote was 51-50, with Vice President J.D. Vance breaking a tie. Republican Senators Susan Collins of Maine, Rand Paul of Kentucky, and Tom Tillis of North Carolina joined Democrats in voting no. Yeah, Yeah. The bill is expected to be the party's marquee legislative achievement heading into next year's midterms. The GOP's slim House majority is at risk. And in the Senate, Tillis's retirement announcement this week handed Democrats a major opening. They're not going to win South Carolina. We're going to win that. In addition to extending the president's 2017 tax cuts, the bill includes scaled-down versions of his campaign priorities, such as no tax on tips, while overhauling Social Security safety net programs and providing new border and military spending. And so it literally came down to Trump. Okay? The bottom line is Republicans, quote unquote Republicans, they would never have voted for this. They only voted for it because they're afraid of Donald Trump and you. It's just that simple. And Tillis, okay, proves it because he's such a coward. If he thought the people of his state were so against this, why would he vote no and then choose not to run for re-election? Because they weren't against it. Because he's a deep state operative, okay? And so now he's not going to run. It's cowardice. He's a coward. And so that's what it took. And also, it took what you and I hate the most. Because Lisa Murkowski, Mitch McConnell's babe in Alaska, who the Senate leadership worked to defeat our candidate, the real Republican in the Republican primary and in the general election. They poured tons of money, millions of dollars into Murkowski so she could win and just be a deep state operative, which she has been. So what happened? She had to be the deciding vote. They gave her a wish list. She just said, I want millions for this, and I want millions for this, and I want millions for that. It's extortion. She got it. Oh, and they say, oh, she's a great legislator because she held you and I and our nation hostage for her petty political, and maybe not so petty. There's millions of dollars of bribes that are going to her buddies in Alaska. Yeah, some of them are ship, fishermen and stuff like that. Yeah, some of the little people got some things. But she's not a U.S. senator. She did not vote for what the people in Alaska wanted. She just extorted the money. But folks, that's the system we're in. And as Donald Trump knows, you got to be able to win the game you're in. We may not like it. That's the way it's done. You just witnessed it. And it was huge. But it got better. It got better because then it moved to the House. And again, they passed the bill on Tuesday, right? Okay. And now you're trying to get the bill to President Trump's desk by Friday, 4th of July. So the House takes it up, and it's as ugly as sin. It can't be any uglier than this. They go all day, all night, because the bottom line is there's no way to change it and send it back to the Senate and then have Murkowski and those guys blow it up, right? That's what they were planning. They were putting poison pills in it so the Chip Roy would lose his mind and say, no, we're going to shake it and send it back to the Senate and create this thing that delays it. That's why we needed one big, beautiful bill, because you couldn't pass two if your life depended on it. We could barely pass this one. There were 20 Republicans at one point, and you could only lose two in the House who were voting no. At 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, our president, Donald Trump, is meeting with them in person, talking to them, and convincing them to vote yes. Wow. Only Donald Trump could do that. The Republicans didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. They're afraid for their lives because we know they're all deep staters. We know we are in this mess because of them. We know they don't do their job. They don't do regular order. They don't vote on amendments. They don't do anything but keep spending, and making themselves richer like Nancy Pelosi. Okay? We know that. But that's the system we're in. And that's why Donald Trump is unique, because he had to make a deal with 20 Republicans. Okay? And he said he didn't do the Markowski thing. He didn't give him a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to talk a little later about what I think he is going to do. But it passed. And it's amazing. And it went all night. And then Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat, minority leader, goes on an 8-hour speech that, folks, was perfect, because it drew a perfect comparison between them and us. Because our bill that we're trying to pass, is just cutting some things, and they're like screaming bloody murder because government never cuts anything. And it's giving you and I some things like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, a tax break for Social Security recipients, a school voucher program, this investment of $1,000 for newborn babies so they can learn about capitalism, energy stuff we wanted. Okay. And not to mention not letting our taxes go up by 68%, which every Democrat voted against. And what did he do for 8 hours? He basically told Americans, you can't make it without us. You need us to spend $2 trillion more than we take in every year to take care of you, because you're just a worthless piece of garbage. And he read letters from people who wrote and said, oh, I'm going to lose my Medicaid. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. Yeah, those aren't Americans. Americans say, get out of my way and I'll pay my own bills and I'll find a way to survive. Americans say, stop stealing my job and sending it overseas and see what I can do. The contrast was stark. And while the Democrats are whistling past the graveyard saying, oh, this is a toxic bill. It's the end of the Republican Party in 2026. This bill, when people see what this did to them, they're going to vote out the Republicans in droves in 2026. It's not true. It's not true. Because like when Trump was president in 16, 17, 18, 19, his tax bill made all of us, the common folk, better off than we'd ever been in our lives. And you're already seeing it. We'll bring receipts. You people new to this podcast, we never make a claim without bringing receipts. I'll be bringing the receipts in a minute, okay? But we are going to be better off because of all these things. And Donald Trump, is responsible for it. And I gave credit because, one of the big things that happened, let me see if it said here, the Passes marks a significant achievement for the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, and Trump, who corralled Republican hardliners all day and night in order to get the necessary support. Some House Republicans opposed things like Medicaid reform and caps on state and local tax deductions. The bill passed 218-14, which included a flip from Ohio GOP Representative Warren Davidson, who voted against the bill during the House's first passage in May. All Democrats voted against the bill, and Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania were the only Republicans who voted against the bill. I wrote to Warren Davidson. I wrote to Chip Roy. And I said to them, we the people appreciate your principled fight to stop the spending, to stop the madness, to cut the things that we all know should be cut. But we also appreciate you, Chip Roy particularly, that you understood the system we are in. And you said, I fought as hard as I could to get what we know we need. But I'm not going to blow the whole thing up because I didn't get my way like Thomas Massie does. Warren Davidson, I said, thank you for taking the wins you could get. And then Chip Roy said, we'll take what we can get and we'll start fighting again for the rest tomorrow. That's correct. Thomas Massie needs to understand the systems we are in. And if you can't win in the system you're in, get the hell out. I love Rand Paul. I love Thomas Massey. They are right. That doesn't mean you can do it. It's pragmatic. That's what Trump is. That's what makes Trump successful. He's not an ideologue. He's not doing it because he has firm beliefs in this or that. He says, we got to get this done, and I'm going to do whatever the hell it takes to get it done, including dropping 16 40,000-pound bombs on Iran. Okay? That's the difference. So this was fundamentally critical to your and my individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. This was what we needed. The coast is now clear. Trump doesn't need really hardly anything else, and he's not going to get anything else from the Republicans. Okay? Hardly anything. We'll see. But he's now got what he needed, which they denied him in his first term. They tied his hands. The Republicans, Paul Ryan, tied his hands behind his back so he couldn't do what we wanted in 16. Now, by passage of this bill, we are full speed ahead. And President Trump knows it. And on July 4th, he signed it. And I wanted to share this picture with you because I want you to see the people in the picture, like Lindsey Graham just elbowing his way right in there next to the president. There's a lot of deep state in there, folks. But he signed it, and it was fantastic. And, President Trump signed the one big, beautiful bill into law on July 4th, celebrating both a major legislative victory and Americans' Independence Day at a White House ceremony. The signing took place at 5:45 p.m. during a military family picnic on the White House grounds. Two B-2 Spirit bombers from Whitman Air Force Base, each escorted by a pair of F-35 fighter jets, just like they were over Iran, okay? Performing a flyover during the signing ceremonies. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senator Lindsey Graham, Treasury Secretary Scott Bassnett, Attorney General Pam Bondi, several other cabinet members, and numerous Republican senators and members of Congress attended the event. It was glorious. I do want to share this, though, just on a personal basis. I was so pleased to see Melania and President Trump on the balcony. They looked fantastic. They looked so happy. This picture doesn't do justice. Melania looked so beautiful, so vibrant, but you could tell they were happy together. They were just so loving of each other, and they looked so relaxed. I was so glad to see that. That was the highlight for me. That was the highlight. It was absolutely awesome. And so now we go forward. But we have to understand our system is broken. It's broken. And so Elon Musk, before the House voted, okay, and the Senate, Musk threatens to start a new political party and primary those who don't cut spending. Elon Musk went nuts, just crazy, okay? He said, and I posted this on our webpage at wethepeopleconvention.org, that logo is an AI logo that I had made up. Musk didn't pick that logo, even though he wants to start a new party called the America Party, okay? Elon Musk vows to defeat politicians who back Trump's mega bill if it's the last thing I do. He said they will lose their primary next year if it's the last thing I do on this earth. Elon Musk is back on a tear against President Donald Trump and is threatening to defeat politicians who vote for it in the primaries. He said, every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase in history, they raised the debt ceiling by $5 trillion, should hang their heads in shame, Musk wrote on X on Monday afternoon, and they will lose their primary next year if it's the last thing that I do. I wrote on the story, we the people can never have representative government until we can vote out of office those in Congress who betray us and do not represent the will of the people. Today, that is not possible. It's not. You and I have spent 16 years trying. And those voting on the big beautiful bill know it. That is why they are not cutting anything and protecting their donors and special interests and denying the will of the people. Okay? That's the problem. The problem is by voting for this, Donald Trump is not going to support anyone to primary them in the Republican primary. That's our problem. These people didn't want the bill, don't believe in what we believe in, don't want to cut spending. They would have if they wanted to cut spending. They didn't, did they? How can you not cut the things that DOJ showed? How can you not do that? Well, because the system is broken. All right? And so in this article, because he's talking about starting a new political party and stuff, I have links that said 62% of Americans favor a third party. Why? Because they know that neither the Democrats or Republicans represent us at all. Donald Trump represents us, not the Republican Party. Our founding fathers were dead set. They said there shouldn't be political parties because then you're for your party, not for America. Right? And that's what we saw. And so I have that click in this thing. And also on that story, I put a link to our letter in 2021 to Donald Trump when he was cast out in the wilderness by the Republicans, urging him to not run as a Republican, to run as an independent, and force Jim Jordan and people to run as independents as well if they really believed in what they believed in. And he didn't do it. But he's not a Republican, and the Republican Party isn't doing any of this. You and I are doing it with Trump, but what happens after him? So the question comes up when Elon Musk says, hey, we're going to primary all these guys, and then he says we're going to start a third party. Well, which is it? Because you can't really do all of that. Your choices, from my viewpoint, are this. You can give us, we the people, finally, the money, Elon, to primary Republicans in the Republican primary with real Republicans. What a concept that would be, because I got news for you. We could beat a lot of these people, but not without the money, right? So Elon, message to you. Maybe that's the way to go. The second thing is, I don't want to be a Republican. It's corrupt as all hell. It's amazingly corrupt. We know that. You've been involved. You can't win the game that's fixed. So, hey, Elon, how about if you fund our candidates who will run as independents and not subject themselves to the nonsense that the parties put you through, the rigged primaries? How about funding our independent candidates so we can actually get people who are responsible to us? Well, that's a concept. And then if you want to start a third party, I got news for you. That's a decades-long effort that you're going to need the grassroots to build. But I'm not for a third party. I'm for no parties. I'm for independence. I don't know what's going to happen, okay? But let's stop. Let's not worry about the details. There's all kinds of stuff on X. Oh, he's a Democrat. He's going to try to blow up the Republican, majority and all that stuff. And he just sees we're $37 trillion in debt, and we just raised the debt ceiling by $5 trillion and didn't really cut squat, okay? And that's not sustainable. He's not crazy. He's just politically not savvy, okay? Like we have after 15, going on 16 years of learning. But I want to share a couple things with you, okay? So this is interesting. One of our great Tea Party leaders from Kentucky years ago told me about this, and I was shocked by it. But there is basically evidence that democracies only last like on average 200 years, and that like 240 years is the limit. And so here's what this means. This is attributed to this Scottish historian, Alexander Fraser Tytler. He suggests that a democracy goes through stages. From bondage, right? We're under the rule of the King of England. Faith, courage, liberty. So we fought the Revolutionary War. We won our liberty. Then we had abundance. And after abundance, you have complacency. And then after that, you have apathy. And then dependence again. And then bondage again. And basically what happens is revolution and your government is over. This is throughout history, any democratic society has gone through this. Where do you think we are on that list? What did I just say about Hakeem Jeffries and what he was talking about? Why don't we want to cut anything? Because the contrast couldn't be clearer. The Democrats are communists, and they claim to be Democrats socialists, like the guy in New York who we're going to talk about in the second half of the podcast. But what's really going on here? It's real simple. When the government finally turns on the people to take your tax dollars to give them to someone else to buy their vote, and then they create dependency, Hakeem Jeffries was just basically saying, you need us to fund your life because you can't make it as a human in this world without our benevolence. Yeah. And the Republicans and we the people and Trump and MAGA are saying, no. We want government out of our lives. We want to restore the Constitution. But here's the problem. We don't have what we started with. What did our founders say? They said, this form of government is for a moral and religious people and is totally unsuitable for any other. We are not that people anymore. You don't need all these police and ICE agents and all these laws and judges and courts and regulations if you can police yourself. If you just follow the 10 commandments and you don't murder and you don't steal, right? That's the problem. And so there's an article I'm going to publish at wethepeopleconvention.org and it'll be in our podcast page. And it says, cynical talk, about the constitutional crisis. The problem is not with the Constitution. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to give you highlights. Let me be frank. I am a constitutional pessimist. This is written by Mark Hendrickson in the spectator.org. I am a constitutional pessimist. Don't get me wrong. I hold our Constitution in the highest regard. I revere it. It embodies the pinnacle of wisdom and enlightenment in a government document. Nobody should blame the Constitution for our pathetic predicament of having a federal government that is $37 trillion in debt and leaders who can't agree on an off-ramp for this fiscal insanity. The fault is with we the people, not our Constitution. For generations, too many Americans have lacked the moral integrity to honor the Constitution and abide by the limits on governmental mischief that it imposes. The Constitution, as noble as it is not self-enforcing. It is simply a codification of principles and guidelines that are only as effective as American voters and politicians allow them to be. Years ago, I wrote that the Constitution had become more or less a dead letter due to the insidious notion that it is a living, breathing document that can accommodate every whim of the avaricious special interests and craven politicians willing to sell themselves to the highest bidder, right? Among other evidence of the demise of the Constitution, I cited our acceptance of unconstitutional money, our rejection of the 10th Amendment that was intended to keep the scope of government activity strictly limited, and the perversion of the general welfare clause, inverting its meaning from providing special interest politics to enshrine special interest politics as a new progressive model operandi. Another problematic cause in the Constitution has been the Commerce Clause. One of the rationales that progressive Supreme Court justices used to justify Obamacare was that if a person does not buy a product, that affects interstate commerce. Translation, under this creative interpretation of the Constitution, everything is interstate commerce, and therefore there's no limit to the federal government's ability to rule over you. That's not the Constitution. That's not what it meant. Today, the Constitution is a hollowed out husk. We honor it more in form than substance. The letter of the Constitution lingers. For example, we still elect a president, except for when we cheat, every 4 years, and member of Congress every 2 or 6 years, but the spirit, the soul, and the Constitution is long gone. That's pretty harsh, right? It's pretty harsh, but it's true. The foundations of our form of government have crumbled, and it's not suitable for the society we have. It's not suitable when over half of Americans rely on government subsidies. That's the problem. How do you put the genie back in the box? I don't know. I don't know if we can. I don't know if we're going to end up with something else. And boy, on the verge of AI and the fundamental base changes it's going to make to literally human existence, I think we're in for some kind of a transformation. I don't know what that is, but I do think what Donald Trump is doing is really important to all of us because he's trying to restore some checks and balances, okay? And so, in this case, I had this situation where I think in the House, when Chip Roy and those guys are talking, Trump talked to them about using some things like rescission. And we've talked about this, so I just want to remind you of this. Under the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, the president can propose a rescission, which is a request to cancel or take back funds that Congress has already appropriated. Congress must approve the rescission within 45 legislative days, or the funds must be released. This is often called a rescission package. So is that part of what Trump promised? That I will go to the Chip Roys and say, we're going to say, here's the Doge cuts. Here's the Doge cuts. Let's cut them. And then they can vote on it separately? I don't know. I've talked about how Trump is working to get rid of birthright citizenship by fighting what's really not constitutional and getting it to the Supreme Court. And we've talked about how that's now set up by the Supreme Court decision about national injunctions and things that happened last week. He's talked, and Russ Vought at OMB have talked about impoundment. The Constitution gives the president the right to say, yeah, you gave this money for this, but we don't need it anymore. Things have changed. We're not going to spend it. And then after Richard Nixon, the Congress put in the Impoundment Act to say, oh, if we say it's got to be spent, it should be spent. Well, that's not legal. And that's going to go to the Supreme Court. And then, as I've talked to you, we would finally be able to hold the president accountable for the debt because we can't hold the Congress accountable for the debt. They're hiding. All the polls show every one of you guys loves your congressman. It's those other guys. But it's not. And they play on that. They say, oh, I'm only one vote. Yeah, I was against this bill because it didn't cut enough, but, I had to vote for it. It's broken. We were supposed to be able to vote out of office those who betrayed us. We can't because they've rigged it. The parties have rigged it through redistricting and through the rules of the party primaries. As you've seen with the Democrats, right? Democrats, democracy, when they don't even have a vote for their presidential candidate. We're going to see change. Hopefully, because of what you and I did in the last 16 years and culminating last November and putting Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Russ Vought and all these really smart people in charge, we're going to restore some of our rules and regulations in the Constitution and our rights for what? Life, liberty, and prosperity. But it's going to be very different. So don't laugh at Elon Musk. Understand, okay? He did a lot of things. He said a lot of things that aren't really true. But the bottom line is, it's wrong. We're $37 trillion in debt and we didn't cut squat. Okay? You can't ignore that. You can't ignore that. Okay, so here's the good news. CNN, comes out with this video, and I don't know what's going on with CNN because they're still batshit crazy on their newscast, but they keep having this guy with these polls proving that Trump's killing it. Here you go.
So we're going to look at the strongly approved number. So this isn't just Republicans who like Donald Trump. This is Republicans who love Donald Trump. And he's up like a rocket. Look at this. In July 2017, the strongly approved was 53%. That's pretty good. But look at where he is now. 63% of Republicans strongly approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing about 5 months into his presidency. Republicans love Donald Trump the way that Americans love Disney World. The bottom line is 63%. That is a huge, huge base. And of course, it's just part of a Republican base in which about 90% of them overall approve of him, including the somewhat approves as well.
I mean, every politician would like this number here, especially to see it go up. How about compared to other presidents who were Republicans?
Yeah, it's history making. It's history making. What are we talking about here? So why don't we look back? We have all the presidents, Republican presidents, going back over the last 35, 36, 37 years. What are we talking about? GOP, who strongly approved 5 months in. Look at this. George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, 46%. Bush 43, 59. You see Trump, the first term, 53. But look at this, 63%. He beats all the other Republicans on the board here. And I was looking even back since Reagan. And get this, Donald Trump beats Ronald Reagan when it comes to the strongly approved 5 months. And of course,
How about that? Okay. Oh, but the Democrats say 2026 is going to be a disaster for you Republicans. Yeah, we voted for this. We voted for this. This is what we want. And we got it because you and I worked hard to get it. You and I made the phone calls that I asked you to make, weeks ago. Call your House members, call your Senate members, tell them they need to pass the big, beautiful bill. I said, stop arguing about the details, because the reality is, when it came down to this week, we needed to pass something. We couldn't determine what was in it because all the backroom deals, because of the corruption of the process. We just needed them to pass something, and they did. And now we can move forward on our own until we can somehow find a way to fix the primaries and the ability for us to hold our elected officials accountable. So crazy stuff, just crazy. So I said I was going to bring receipts for those of you who are new. All right. I said, people are doing better. They did better under, Trump first time. They're doing it again. Here you go. Golden age. U.S. economy adds 147,000 jobs, much higher than expected. Unemployment rate unexpectedly falls. So what is this? Employers in the United States added 140,000 workers to their payrolls in June, the Department of Labor said Thursday. And the unemployment rate declined to 4.1%, defying predictions of labor market sluggishness following the implementation of President Trump's tariffs. Economists had been expecting 110,000. I love these economists. Like I used to tell you back during Biden's years, how can you get paid? How can you make a living and be that wrong? What's the difference between 147 and 110,000? It's like 40% or 30%. How can you be that wrong? And you're supposedly an expert. And they predicted the unemployment rate would stay at would tick up to 4.3, and it went down. The April jobs report was revised up by 11,000 from a gain of 140,000 to 158,000. May was revised up by 5,000 to 144,000 jobs. Combined, the revisions added 16,000 jobs to the April and May reports. You may recall that under Biden, they were lying to you about jobs. Go back, look it up. All the jobs were government jobs and illegals. Americans were losing millions of jobs under Biden, right? That was the plan, destroy the middle class. What's happening here? And then they would revise down. We did a story, when after Trump won in January, 6 months of Biden's jobs reports were all lies. They were revised down by 500,000 jobs. All of Trump's are being revised up. There's your receipts, kid. And why? We're not going to lower interest rates and these jobs can't keep coming because these Trump tariffs are going to cause problems for businesses. Yeah. Trump administration's customs revenue tops $100 billion, boosted by tariffs. The U.S. has now collected more than $100 billion in customs revenue since President Trump took office. The revenue from Trump's sweeping global levies is substantially higher than in past years. For the current fiscal year through the end of May, collections are about 65% higher than the same period the year prior, per Treasury data. The overall effect of tariff rate is now at the highest level since the late 1930s, when the federal government primarily funded itself on tariffs. And there's more to come. And that was not calculated in the big, beautiful bill and the scoring of whether it raises taxes or cuts or whether, Donald Trump's got a plan. We're going to have more money than ever. And the deficit, more accurately, the annual deficit, I don't think is going to be 2 trillion or the 1.7 they're claiming. I think it could be less. It could even be balanced if he uses rescission and impoundment and tariffs. And then guess what? All these jobs, all these manufacturing jobs. Well, what are those? Not only are they good for you and me, because you can go to work and make a nice salary and get benefits and stuff, but you pay taxes. And where do those taxes go? Into the federal treasury. To do what? Reduce the deficit. That's what happened under Trump. Oh, they just want to ignore that. He's not without a plan. It's not like Donald Trump doesn't want to cut. It's not like he doesn't know we have to do this, but they got a plan to get out of it. And we, the people, have to support that, not because Donald Trump is an ideologue and we adore him like Obama's people adored him. No, because Donald Trump thinks like we do and acts like we do. Okay? That's what it's all about. And so again, what about we the people? Trump's energy policies drive record low gas prices as 61 million Americans plan to travel on July 4th. It's actually 72 million people felt they could afford to go on vacation. That's awesome. Americans can't wait to pack up their cars and hit the open highways this Independence Day weekend. And basically the good news hiding at gas stations isn't just the occasional clean restroom. It's something that helps every driver's wallet. Despite fighting in the Middle East that would normally make prices jump, Americans are enjoying a welcome break that few thought possible this summer. Gas prices have hit their lowest point in 4 years, with a national average at $3.20 per gallon. Even more amazing is that these low prices are holding steady despite recent U.S. strikes on Iran nuclear sites. Energy experts give credit to President Trump's team for creating stability and pushing our domestic energy to produce. They said the national average is 320. Today in Akron, Ohio, it's 275. That helps every American. So don't give me this tax cuts for the wealthy and the oligarchs the Democrats want you to believe. It's all horse hockey, kids. Don't believe it. And so we're going to wrap up the first half of our show with this story because I just think it's wonderful. Paramount settles Donald Trump lawsuit, clearing path for Skydance merger. $16 million payment to Trump, but no apology in 60-minute affair. This is the deal where 60 Minutes actually altered the interview with Kamala Harris to basically make an illegal campaign contribution to try to get her elected. And Donald Trump called it out and sued them for like $20 billion. And they've settled. They're going to pay Donald Trump $16 million. Now, there's talk that there's a quid pro quo, that Trump's administration was holding up this merger with this Skydance group. Okay. But, we're going to see. We'll see how that plays out. I can't believe that Trump would do that because it's so obviously illegal. But bottom line is, go woke, go broke. Donald Trump's going to make you pay. And that's a beautiful thing, baby. That's a beautiful thing. Okay? So hope you enjoyed the first half of the podcast. We're going to take a short break and come back to the second half of the podcast. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. And my name is Tom Zawistowski. We'll see you in a couple minutes. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio, 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. What, something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. If you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this, whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday. So if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday. And in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. All right, and we're back for the second half. Sorry for the little pause there between the two spots, but we hope you had a good experience with the first half of the podcast. I've got some really good things, but a little more quick hitting for the second half of the podcast. So thanks for sticking with us. Also, want to remind you that we have the chapters player. For those of you who don't know, on our podcast page, where you can, it takes till Sunday to get it put on our website, but you can go to any story. We list all the stories in the podcast, and some of them you already know, so you can skip over that, but you can go to any story and you click on it, and it takes you right to that part of the video, and then it gives you a link that you can copy and text or email or post on social media. It's when you want to share just that story. Okay. Plus, we have all the stories that are in the podcast with links to the articles about those stories if you want to go more in depth. So the chapters player is a great thing. And I just got statistics on that. And while we have, thousands of people listening to the podcast, thousands of people watching the podcast on Roku, Rumble, on YouTube now, we're blowing up on YouTube. We're doing these shorts on TikTok and Facebook and things. But our chapters player gets like 3,000 uses a week. So that's pretty cool, because it's just a way to help you get the information you need with the least, having spend your time doing it, right? We want to make it efficient. So use that. Follow me on X. In that video, it says we're not on X or Facebook. We are now on X, Facebook, and YouTube, which we haven't been for many, many years. And so it's Tom Z, WTPC. I post regularly on X, on Gab, on MeWe, on Facebook. So you can follow me on social media. Mostly it's Tom Z, WTPC, or We the People Convention. And that's how we keep in touch with you guys. So, please, share those links and stay informed during the week from that and our emails and our text messages. And if you don't get our text messages, emails, sign up, okay? All right, let's get into this, the second half of the show. Going to talk a lot about international issues because Trump, it's all been, oh my gosh, domestic. And, so it's important that you understand there are big things going on. So while all this is going on, Trump announces Israel has agreed to a 60-day ceasefire with Hamas. This is another thing that people thought was not possible. All right. President Trump on Tuesday announced that Israeli officials have agreed to a 60-day ceasefire in its war with Hamas, which will be presented to the terrorist organization by Qatar and Egypt. And now we're hearing that Hamas is interested. The announcement comes ahead of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the White House on Monday, this Monday. Israel has also recently agreed to a ceasefire with Iran after Israel and the United States bombed its nuclear facilities. Trump did not disclose the details of the agreement, but said all the parties involved will use the ceasefire to bring lasting peace to the region. My representatives had a long and productive meeting with Israel today on Gaza. Trump posted on Truth Social, Israel has agreed to the necessary conditions to finalize a 60-day ceasefire, during which time we will work with all parties to end the war. Qataris and Egyptians, this is important, who have worked very hard to help bring peace, will deliver this final proposal, he continued. I hope for the good of the Middle East that Hamas takes this deal because it will not get a better deal. It will only get worse. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I love how he's been doing that. Thank you for your attention to this matter, as if it's a memo from the CEO to employees. Again, he can walk and chew gum. All this stuff is going on, and his staff is still deporting illegals. The DOJ is still winning in court. That they're still cutting trade deals. Last week, Trump announced a trade deal with Vietnam. And a lot of you are like, oh, yeah, Vietnam, is that a big deal or not? It's a big deal, and here's why. President Trump on Wednesday announced a trade deal that was struck with Vietnam, setting a tariff rate on the country at 20%. He said as part of the deal, Vietnam will give the U.S. access to its markets with no tariff. That's a big deal. We can now sell, vehicles to Vietnam on an equal basis with anybody else. That's a big concession. The U.S., however, will impose a 40% tariff on goods made in the country with a higher import tax rate, but shipped to the States through Vietnam. It is my great honor to announce that I've just made a trade deal with the Socialist Republic of Vietnam after speaking with Tom Lam, the highly respected General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam. It will be a great deal of cooperation between our two countries. The terms are that Vietnam will pay the United States a 20% tariff on any and all goods sent into our territory and a 40% tariff on any transshipping. In return, Vietnam will do something that has never been done before, give the United States total access to their markets for trade. Wow, that's a big deal. And it's a big blow to China because what was going on is countries would ship stuff to Vietnam, have them assembled there and shipped from Vietnam to the U.S. to avoid tariffs. And now they're going to have a 40% tariff on them, which is going to force those countries to stop doing that and ship directly to us and try to cut a better deal. Trump then said on July 4th that, hey, July 9th was the deadline I gave the European Union, Canada, all these other people, to do this. And if you don't do it, we're just going to raise your cost of doing business here. And so that income coming into our country, which we just talked about from the tariffs, will go up more. And more companies in those countries will start building factories here because they don't want to pay the tariff. It's a beautiful thing. Get behind it. It works. We've already shown you it works. On this, on the same topic, Canada, who played, just stupid stunt during all the stuff that Trump's dealing with. Canada decides they're going to put a tax on our digital companies, like our social media companies. Canada resumes trade talks with the U.S. after rescinding digital tax service tax. Carney agrees to resume negotiations and halt digital services tax following Trump's ultimatum of severe tariffs. So Carney announces that we're going to put taxes on U.S. tech companies, and Trump goes ballistic and says, "Oh yeah, our negotiations are off. I'm imposing tariffs on you right now." Within 24 hours, Carney caved. Within 24 hours, because Canada is a joke. They're a joke. They have no leverage over us, and yet they want to pretend that they can leverage us. Good luck with that. Not happening. Okay? Now, while all this is going on, the thing in Ukraine is not going well. This was a wild story, okay? Trump administration halts some weapon shipments to Ukraine to put America's interests first. This caused a lot of panic, okay? But it's what we've been telling you guys all along. The Trump administration has halted delivery of certain military firepower to Ukraine over concerns the U.S. stockpiles were dropping too low. The White House on Tuesday confirmed that 155 millimeter artillery rounds, Patriot air defenses, guided missile, multiple launch rocket systems, Stinger, AM-7, and Hellfire missiles bound for Ukraine will not be shipped following a Pentagon assessment. The decision was made to put America's interests first following a Defense Department review of our nation's military support and assistance to other countries across the globe. Okay, well, guess what? Ukraine is firing 6,000 of these 155 millimeter shells a month, and we're manufacturing like 1,400. We've been doing that for years. So what do you think is going to happen? And I've said to you, we've talked about the fact, and that's why in the big, beautiful bill, there's money, more money for defense, when you and I believe defense is totally inefficient, and we've been spending money on programs that we don't need and making Grumman and Lockheed and all these people filthy rich, right? The defense industrial complex. But the bottom line is we had no choice but to put money in the bill because we're in real trouble. And that's why I talked to you about the Anduril plant in Columbus, Ohio, that they're rushing to build, so we can manufacture drones and things at scale and ramp them up when we need to. Our defense manufacturing system is a mess, like everything else. Because why? The communist Chinese bribed American presidents and senators and congressmen and governors and everyone you can name. Go to our webpage, wethepeopleconvention.org, click on the button that says Democrats, and China. You'll see it, the proof. I bring the receipts, okay? To do what? To destroy America. Well, great way to destroy them. Well, let's kill 100,000 military-age men a year with fentanyl, and let's make sure they can't manufacture any frickin' weapons. So, Ukraine was panicked. NATO was panicked. The Defense Department came back and said, well, don't get too crazy here. We're not cutting off everything, but we're just finally doing an inventory. Wow, what a concept, huh? How about that? We can't think that's smart. What the heck? In the meantime, we're under assault and have been. This was a bizarre story. North Korean remote workers at U.S. firms funneled millions into weapons program. I'm like, what? What is this? The Department of Justice charged multiple individuals in a scheme where North Korea sent IT workers with fake identities to get remote jobs at U.S. companies. The wages were secretly funneled back to fund North Korea's weapons program. Several Chinese and Taiwanese nationals were charged, and sensitive U.S. data may have been accessed. The nationwide operation led to charges and the seizure of financial accounts, websites, and laptops used to execute the fraud. Separate cases in Georgia and Massachusetts expose that the scheme is generating extensive revenue in North Korea's government and even supplying workers access to sensitive and proprietary data from American corporations hiring them. North Korea's government dispatched thousands of workers with fake or stolen identities to find remote work as IT employees at American companies. These companies believed the workers were hired based in the U.S. when they were actually sanctioned in North Korea or China. The wages were transferred into accounts controlled by their governments. We're under attack. And these are defense contractors hiring these people, right? Yeah, we're pretty smart, aren't we? We're dumb as a box of rocks. No one's been watching the store for a whole long time, kids, for a whole long time. So speaking of our biggest enemy in the world, the Communist Chinese, who, remember I did the thing for you 3 weeks ago. Their policy is we live, you die. That's their policy to America. Trump DOJ catches Chinese agents spying on U.S. Navy, trying to recruit U.S. servicemen. Let's see what that says here. 2 Chinese nationals have been arrested for spying on the U.S. Navy. They are facing charges of allegedly acting as agents for the People's Republic of China government to collect intelligence from U.S. Navy service members and bases and attempting to recruit military members to carry out tasks for the Ministry of State Security, China's main intelligence force. The men also are accused of facilitating a dead drop cash payments on their behalf with these sailors that they're trying to get to turn. The U.S. Department of Justice said Chinese nationals Yan Chen and Liren Lei were arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigations on Friday, June 27th. They are facing charges of carrying out various clandestine intelligence tasks in the U.S. on the behalf of the Communist Chinese. Yeah, they're not our friends. They're at war with us. We're finally at war with them and being serious. And that's important. I thought this was important. We're talking about DOJ, right? And there's been a lot of complaining, Mamdani and Kash Patel, they're not charging enough people. And I gave you that Dan Bongino report last week in the first half, right at the end of the first half of the podcast, where Bongino talked about thousands of people being charged, arrested, deported from all kinds of crimes. And so this I thought was great. Trump DOJ charges more Antifa members for ICE facility siege. Let's see here. 4 more individuals were charged in connection with criminal acts during the Antifa-led siege of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Office facility in South Portland. The siege has led to over 20 arrests with charges ranging from arson to assault on federal officers. So what's the difference today from 2020? From 2020, Antifa could act with impunity. They could assault police. They could assault citizens. They could attack businesses. They could attack federal buildings, and no one did anything, right? Not anymore. 20 of them been charged. They're going to prison for a long time. Guess what? They won't be at the next protest, right? We show you all those protests that the tracking data from their cell phones show that these people have been at 80 different protests, right? With the Tesla thing and the No Kings thing. The way to stop that is lock them up. Congrats to the DOJ. This was also on a kind of an interesting angle. Justice Department abruptly fires 3 prosecutors involved in January 6th criminal cases, AP sources say. So this is from the Associated Press, so it's not going to be a fair story, but it's an important story. The Justice Department on Friday fired at least 3 prosecutors involved in the U.S. Capitol riot criminal cases. The latest moves by the Trump administration targeting attorneys connected to the massive prosecution on January 6, 2021, according to 2 people familiar with the matter. Those dismissed included 2 attorneys who worked as supervisors overseeing the January 6 prosecutions in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, as well as a line attorney who prosecuted cases stemming from the Capitol attack. The sources spoke on condition of anonymity. A letter that was received by one of the prosecutors was signed by Attorney General Pam Bondi. The letter did not provide a reason for their removal, effective immediately, citing only Article 2 of the United States Constitution and the laws of the United States, according to a copy seen by Associated Press. The terminations marked yet another escalation of norm-shattering, moves that have raised alarms over the Trump administration's disregard for civil service protections for career lawyers and the erosion of the Justice Department's independence from the White House. Oh yeah, they had independence from the White House when Joe Biden's staff was meeting with Jack Smith to tell them how to prosecute Donald Trump. You're talking about that independence from the White House? Or you're talking about disregard for civil service protections when you attack the whistleblowers who said these prosecutions were unjust? Disregard for civil service? Give me a break. Top leaders of the Justice Department have also fired employees who worked on the prosecutions against Trump and demoted a slew of career supervisors in what has been seen as an effort to purge the agency of lawyers seen as insufficiently loyal. How about that they weren't insufficiently loyal? I talked to you, and you guys are new to this podcast. We said all along, we are not for retribution. We are not going to go after Crystal Correa and Alejandro Mayorkas and the people that did the Russia things because of retribution. We're going to go after them because they're criminals. They broke the law. We are for justice, not retribution. But the AP is going to tell you, oh, they're getting fired because they didn't show loyalty. How about the ones that were hired by the Biden and Obama administrations because they did show loyalty to the Obama and Biden and the Communist Party and the leftists, not to the Constitution of which they swore an oath? See how this gets inverted? This is a big deal. Those people need to be dismissed because they broke the law and they should be charged. I'm not happy they were just dismissed. I want them charged. We'll see what happens, though. They're not doing nothing, as Dan Bongino keeps trying to tell you, and follow him on X. They're not doing nothing. It's just there's so much to do. It takes more than 6 months, right? Takes a little while. Okay. This was good news. We got this. Last week was a great week because we just ran the table in the Supreme Court, right? Everything broke our way. But this week, we got another ruling that's important. Appeals court likely backs Trump on Aliens Enemies Act. President Donald Trump's determined use of the Alien Enemies Act to enable fast-tracking deportations is likely to get approved by a 3-judge appeals court. Under the headline, appeals court seems likely to back Trump's deportations under wartime law. The Washington Post said that in the discussions with the appeals court, the judges asked, can you give me a Supreme Court case that says a federal court can countermand the chief executive's officer's decision in an armed conflict? Judge Andrew Oldham challenged Lee Garnett, an attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union. Oldham, who was nominated to court by Trump during his first term, added later, are we allowed to conduct a federal trial to countermand the president when he says it's an invasion? Judge Leslie Southwick, who was appointed by President George W. Bush, acknowledged that Tres de Aguara may not fit the traditional definition of an invading foreign power. Still, he said, Trump has described the game's alleged activities in the United States in ways that could be considered a preface to an invasion. They did invade us. They came here intentionally to plunder our cities, to steal our money, to attack our citizens. It's an invasion. 12 million people coming in is an invasion. So again, Trump is reestablishing the presidential rights under the Constitution. He's not a dictator. He's not a king. That's what Obama was. That's what Biden was. And the left always accuses you of doing what they actually are doing. So this is good stuff. I don't know if you heard about this, but of course the left, and again, these are treasonous acts, and I don't understand why you're not prosecuted for this, but they put together an application, a phone app, that you could report seeing ICE agents in a community so all the illegals can run away and hide. Okay? So what does CNN do? CNN puts it on the air and promotes it, tells people how to get it and tells them to use it. And then CNN might regret promoting that ICE tracker app after what Trump just said. Well, what did he say? He was asked about it. The White House is looking into possible criminal charges against CNN after it published a report about an app allowing users to track immigration and custom enforcement activities in their area. President Donald Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem discussed the matter with reporters at the grand opening of the Florida detention facility known as Alligator Alcatraz. I'm sure you had lots of coverage of that. Okay. And He said, while we're working with the Department of Justice to see if we can prosecute them for that, because what they're doing is actively encouraging people to avoid law enforcement activities and operations, Noam said. We're going to actually go after them and prosecute them with a partnership of Attorney General Pam Bondi if we can, because what they're doing, we believe, is illegal. Okay? So, yeah, but how about the people that put the app? How about, remember when the government told Twitter before it was X, and told Facebook and told all the other social media that you've got to take Donald Trump off and General Flynn and Sidney Powell and everybody else because they're a threat to our nation. And Apple and Microsoft, Google, took them out of their app store. How come this app isn't being taken out? Oh, that would be censorship? No, I don't think so. I think it's illegal. And their policies say you can't do illegal things on our social media. So don't just prosecute CNN, though that's a good thing. All right, they're nearly dead already. But how about the people that did the app? Let's go after them. And how about Apple and Google? Let's go. But you know what Patriots said? You gotta love this. It's Independence Day, and we think on our own. So what had happened? Lots of you got the app and started reporting ICE agents everywhere. They're everywhere. Okay? And so now all the illegals are like panicked because the app's worthless because you basically are reporting ICE where they're not. So they don't know where they are, where they aren't. That's the American spirit. That's what we do. Yeah, you might want to do that. I know some of you get off on that kind of thing. So I thought I'd tell you about that. I thought that's pretty interesting. This is important, again, to our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. We are fighting all these systems. We're fighting all these things that are against us. These institutions have been corrupted. Education is one of the worst. So this is an important story that you probably did not hear, and that's why you watch this podcast, because we're looking, for those of you who are new, this is a weekly news summary show in which we give our opinions, but what we're doing is we're looking for the truth. We're getting rid of the propaganda, or at least exposing it. And then we're bringing you stories that do affect your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity that you don't know about, you don't hear about. This is important. Texas A&M system joins fellow Republican-led state universities and new accreditation agency. What about that? The Texas A&M University system will join several other university systems from Republican-led states to launch a new accreditation agency. According to U.S. News and World Report, Texas A&M University system will join systems in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina to launch Commission for Public Higher Education. Accreditation is a process in which an outside entity evaluates a college or university to determine if it meets certain standards. Typically, these standards relate to academic programs, faculty, and resources. The process has become increasingly controversial in recent years as accreditation agencies have become viewed as a vehicle through which to left-wing programs such as diversity, equity, inclusion, and radical LGBTQ activism are imposed on universities. Activist James Lindsay has described accreditation as a scam and a trap, arguing that it is used to force ideological agendas. That's just a fact. Again, coercion. The left, the commies, no one wants what they're selling. They don't want what they're selling. So what do you have to do? You have to force people to do it. And they say, well, Trump is going to cut your funding if you don't stop DEI. Yeah, except DEI is against the law. DEI is racism against white people. It's against multiple laws. Forcing people to put in DEI isn't enforcing the law. That's the role of government. It's destroying the law. And so by moving to create new accreditation agencies, we can start to fix this. The creation of this new accreditation agency follows a series of disputes between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the Southern Association of College and School Commissioners on Colleges. Texas A&M is also accredited through that agency. President Trump has issued an executive order to reform higher education accreditation, and that's what this process is about. You're going to get fairer, better universities if the accreditation says you got to teach history, so you got to restore, some of the basics. You can't have these programs that are worthless. And oh, by the way, in the big, beautiful bill, two things I didn't know were in that. There are tons of surprises in this thing. Two things, though, about education. One is they put a tax on endowments based on the size of the endowments. So they can't just have, like Harvard, $52 billion in endowment and pay no tax on because they're a nonprofit. How's that? Number two, they said, we're going to have these schools are going to be partially responsible for student loans. That if you go to a school and you owe $100,000 and you can't pay your student loans, I don't know how it works. I haven't read it. I just saw it. But it'd be something like the university will have to pay part of your student loan. Oh, wow. How about that? Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. So, just, sharing things with you that you didn't hear that are really important. Really important. Okay. And then, I have not done a lot with this, but then these two stories came out and I felt I should share them with you because we're always trying to expose the propaganda. We're always trying to expose the lies of the left. So everybody's crazy about, this Islamist, Marxist, communist who won the Democratic primary in New York and it's the end of the world and Fox News and all the people based in New York, that's all they want to cover as if we in the Midwest and the rest of the country give a rat's butt about how stupid the people in New York are, right? Oh no, but they're going to force feed us this crap. That's why their ratings are down and you watch things like this podcast, right? Because you don't want to hear that crap. You don't want that nonsense in your house. But let me shed a little light on this. This is most New Yorkers didn't vote for Mamdani. Only 5% voted for him. The rest stayed home. This is from Front Page Magazine, which is in New York and knows this stuff. After Zohran Mamdani secured the Democratic nomination for mayor, millions of people around the country are wondering how the city that lived through 9/11 could have done this. The answer is, it didn't. Less than 30% of Democrats voted in the mayoral primary. Of supposedly 43.5% voted for Mamdani. So about 12.9% of New York Democrats voted for Mamdani. 56% of registered voters in the city are Democrats. So some 7.2% of the city's residents voted for him. New York City has a population of 8.2 million. Of those, 432,305 or 5% voted for Mamdani. That's hardly a mandate, is it? That's hardly what you thought. Oh, Democrats want this guy. The media is doing its best to hype those numbers as a stunning mandate when what they really represent are high levels of turnout by white hipsters and Muslim immigrants who were enthused by the prospects of electing a Muslim terrorist supporter to run New York City. Who are these 5%? They aren't New Yorkers because polls showed us Mamdani performing poorly with anyone over 50, with African Americans, Latinos, and working class white voters. Mamdani's base isn't New Yorkers. It's a coalition of white hipsters, not sure what that means, and Muslim immigrants. Most of them weren't even in the city during 9/11, like Mamdani, and have no roots in the city and no connections to its history. Okay? Yeah, that's kind of a problem. He has no connection to the biggest thing that ever happened to the city. Oh, but the story gets more interesting. Okay? Tons of thousands of new voters registered to vote for Mamdani, but those numbers aren't natural. The New York Times has a shallow cheerleading article about where Zohran Mamdani's votes came from. As I already pointed out, he benefited from low turnout and won the vote of some 5% of New Yorkers, which you just talked about. But the Times had some interesting figures in this chart. The Mamdani campaign had focused on registering voters, and he also appeared to have drawn thousands of voters to the primary who did not vote 4 years ago. Those are 40,000 people voted for him who weren't registered 4 years ago. Those are pretty incredible numbers. That 40,000 voters make up nearly 10% of his total. But who are these new voters? Who are they? So they put out a chart in the New York Times, okay? And here's what's interesting about the chart. A review by the Times of these likely ethnic makeup of the electorate found that voters with names associated with majority Muslim countries were far more likely to vote in 2025 than 2021. Not much more than that, except that the age makeup is naturally impossible. The New York Times drops this impossible chart and then has nothing to say about it. Age makeup like this doesn't exist in elections, yet we're supposed to believe that 18 to 25-year-olds voted at higher rates than any other group in their primary, and that just doesn't happen. Well, how could it happen? Well, geez, we just imported 12 million people from foreign countries, many of them Muslims, into the United States. And a whole bunch of them went to New York. And oh, what a surprise, of the people who voted for him, the largest age group were these 18 to 25-year-olds, which never happens. Stay tuned, folks. This baby is rigged. He ain't going to win. They're going to take him out in New York one way or the other if Trump doesn't deport him, okay? But it's all a fraud. It's a show. It's not real. Don't be fooled. That's why you watch this podcast. And so Trump continues to fight to keep non-citizens off voter rolls and reignites that fight in his second term. The Supreme Court has never made a determination on the legal merits of the argument that non-citizens should not be counted in the United States Census, but may be soon forced to do so. The fight to clarify the census and subsequently adjust congressional seats, electoral college votes, and federal funding is coming down the pike, according to White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. Miller indicated last month that he is eager to drive straight in that, and that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick will help lead the effort. Trump has at his disposal a number of avenues to accomplish this goal, one of which includes Lutnick's agency. Utilizing this route, the Commerce Department could propose adding a census question to distinguish citizens, legal permanent residents, and unauthorized immigrants, as suggested by the lawsuit filed by the Republican-led states and the Department of Commerce in January 2025. The data could then be used to exclude non-citizens from apportionment, though not necessarily from the overall count. I said that Trump should fire everyone in the Census Department because they admitted that they lied on the 2020 census and they gave Democrats like 12 House seats they shouldn't have had, which is why the votes this week were so close, okay? But they have a plan. They're working the issue. And no, illegals should not be counted in the census for apportionment of congressional seats and for federal funding. No, you're illegal. You don't have the rights of citizens. And Trump, under it all, is fighting. These are fundamental changes, okay? And that's really important. Just got a couple more stories here that you're gonna love. And again, I take a lot of pleasure in this story. You can tell by the graphic that we created. University of Penn agrees to strip trans athletes of titles and apologize to women athletes. And you can see, for those of you listening to the podcast, I've got a picture of Will Thomas, not Leah Thomas, on the stage as a first place finisher in the national championship. And I've got an arrow pointing to his head saying, you lose, because the University of Pennsylvania has agreed to ban transgender women from its women's sports teams, resolving a federal civil rights investigation centered on former swimmer, quote, Leah Thomas. Okay, his name is Will Thomas. It's not Leah. I crossed that out and put Will. The U.S. Department of Education announced a voluntary agreement Tuesday. Yeah, voluntary. They were trying to save their butts because they were going to get fined millions of dollars. Stating that Penn violated Title IX by allowing Thomas to compete in women's events during the 2021-22 season. As part of the resolution, Penn will reinstate Division I swimming records and titles to athletes displaced by Thomas' victories and issue personalized apology letters to each of them per the Department of Education. The university must adopt biology-based definitions of male and female in athletics, and publicly commit to barring males from competing in female athletic programs. University of Pennsylvania and the NCAA did not immediately respond to requests for comments, but the NCAA has already done the same thing based on Trump clarifying this is the official policy of the U.S. government. And the NCAA said, if that's the case, we're going to follow the law. The agreement marks a significant development in the Trump administration's broader campaign to restrict transgender participation in women's sports. Education Secretary Linda McMahon called the outcome a victory for women and girls, signaling a more aggressive federal stance on enforcing Title IX. Based on biological sex. The case has reignited national debate over fairness in women's athletics, transgender rights, and the scope of federal rights, civil rights protections. It also sets a precedent for how schools may be required to handle similar cases under current federal leadership. Hear, hear. You bet. That's what needs to happen. And again, I say to people all the time, what separates Donald Trump from everyone else, literally, is that he doesn't just talk. He doesn't just sign a piece of paper. He signed a piece of paper in what, January, saying, no men in women's sports. But then he backed it up. And he backed it up with lawsuits and with real fines against Harvard, against Penn, against all these other people, the California Athletic Association and stuff. And then he got real results. Not just, talk. The women are getting the trophies. The women are getting put in the record books. The women are being recognized for their achievements. And Will Thomas is not. That's what we voted for. That's what we want. That's what makes this an amazing time in our country, that we celebrate this Independence Day weekend. And so on the topic of the trans things, this little ditty popped up. Supreme Court to hear cases on banning males in female sports next year. The Supreme Court on Thursday agreed to hear 2 cases on the banning of males in female sports. The cases are from West Virginia and Idaho, where 2 transgender students are challenging the respective states' bans. Both students won injunctions allowing them to continue competing in female sports, but Trump's going to say that's illegal. The court will hear oral arguments later this year after their next session begins in October, and they'll expect to rule next June. They're going to rule it's illegal. You're a boy. Title IX restricts you, and you can't just decide that you can compete against women. The law says you can't. It's called Title IX. I personally spent a good part of my career in college athletics fighting for Title IX. And they didn't fight for it for boys to go against girls. I fought for it for girls to get treated equal to what the men were being treated. And then the left destroyed everything they touch. So one more trans deal, because I want all of you to know that we fight because when you fight, you can win. And it's worth standing up for what you believe in. Because if you don't, they win. Here's a great story. Victory for Team Common Sense. Woman wins huge settlement after calling out trans insanity. Chalk up another win for Team Common Sense after 82-year-old Julie Jamin won a $65,000 settlement because she refused to be quiet about a man being in her women's locker room and was subsequently banned from using her local YMCA pool in Washington State. In a statement from the Center for American Liberty, the nonprofit group that defends the civil liberties of Americans, said Jaman's settlement was a major victory for free speech and civil liberties. Julie Jaman has reached a $65,000 settlement in her lawsuit against the city of Port Townsend and the Olympic Peninsula YMCA after being permanently banned from the Mountain View pool for expressing concerns about men in the women's locker room. This case was never just about one woman being banned from a publicly owned pool. It was about the fundamental right of every American to speak truth without fear of retaliation, Mark Trammell, CEO of the Center for American Liberty, said. Julie Jaman bravely stood her ground, endured attacks on her character, and today's settlement affirms that government officials cannot silence dissenting voices through intimidation or retribution. Speaking following her victory, Julie said she never imagined that expressing concerns about the safety and privacy of women and girls would lead me to being shunned and banned. I'm grateful that justice has been served and that my voice was heard. This is a victory for common sense, women's rights, and the right to speak the truth. The right that we all celebrate this weekend, Independence Day. The right we have that no one in other nations have. You cannot speak the truth in other countries like you can here. Now, the Bidens and people were trying to infringe on that, and they're going to be prosecuted for that, and we're stopping that. So we were, our rights were being infringed, but we never gave them up. You and I never gave them up. We never cowered on this podcast. You've never cowered in your conversations with people. You said, this is wrong, and you're not going to force me to say it's right. Boys can't be girls, okay? Whites aren't racist. You are, because you're saying they're racist. We said the truth. Always say the truth. Always. If you want to be free, you must say the truth. You cannot cower. You cannot give in, no matter what the cost. That's just the reality. That's what the Patriots from January 6th showed. They went to prison because they wouldn't say, Donald Trump told me to do it. They wouldn't say this was an insurrection. They believed in the Constitution. They put their lives on the line. That's what Americans do. That's who we celebrate this Independence Day. That's what's beautiful about this country. Got two more stories and we're going to wrap it up. It's going to be one of the shorter podcasts we've done in a while, but hey, it's a holiday weekend and I want to go to some picnics and do some things myself. Okay? So two more stories. This is important. I told you that we ask you to do things in this podcast, all right? Because we are not spectators. We are participants in our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. You got to talk about this story. The whole marijuana is safe scam is falling apart. And lots of people are being hurt, including people in your family, in your community, in your state. This article I posted this week, again, you didn't hear any of this, all right? You didn't hear this. It's by Alex Berenson, who is a guy that was not a doctor, but who came out during COVID and just was like reading this stuff and questioning it. And he became pretty famous and he was on Fox a lot, because he was a dissenting voice who did what I just told you we have to do. He wouldn't shut up when he had valid questions and he had facts that he could prove. And so he's on Substack and we support his Substack and you can go to this story and read. But this is a really intelligent, well thought out story that you can share, but you certainly have to read it. As cannabis legalization spreads, mounting research reveals alarming health impacts while promised benefits fail to materialize. As drug advocates push marijuana legislation over the past 15 years, they portrayed the drug as harmless, a mild intoxicant with few side effects. Cannabis, the term scientists refer for marijuana, might even have medical value, advocates said. The truth is the opposite. Even as states from Maine to California have legalized cannabis, researchers have published papers after paper showing its risks, particularly to heavy or daily users. I don't mean the munchies or falling asleep on the couch. Powerful evidence links the drug to heart attacks, strokes, severe mental illness, and even suicides. And he brings the receipts, folks. This guy never says anything without the receipts. Cannabis is an active ingredient. The chemical called THC are toxic to the heart and brain. They are also much more addictive than many users realize. Though cannabis does not cause the physical dependency of alcohol, it can make users psychologically dependent, leading to irritability, depression, and mood swings if they cut back. A huge new study, which is linked in this story, shows that illegalization is linked to sharp increases in diagnosis of cannabis addiction. As more Americans see the problem firsthand, their views of cannabis are slowly turning negative, a recent Gallop poll found. Even in deep blue New York, almost twice as many residents say cannabis legalization has hurt their quality of life as has helped it. The science is clear. Even for adults, cannabis isn't safe, especially for daily use. For teens whose brains are still developing, it is highly risky, and at worst can lead to lifelong psychiatric problems. It is addictive. Go to wethepeopleconvention.org, click on this story in the articles section, and then share it. Read it and then share it. That's a direct ask. It's important. Okay? And I'm going to close with this because I think this is even more important. I know those of you who watch this podcast know I have been fighting this fight for over a year. The fight to stop children from being able to use social media. Okay? But this video, you got to watch. Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Haidt sound the alarm on what social media is doing to our children and to you. I'm telling you, I'm promising you, if you spend the time to watch that video, you will act because it will scare you to death. The evidence is overwhelming, but you don't know it. Our job is to provide you with the information to know so you can protect your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. The biggest threat to your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity and our nation and our children is what the psychological effects of social media, which this video goes into much more depth than I've ever had about the studies that say what happens to your brain when you're looking at these social media things all day long. Smartphones and social media are destroying our children and your mind. We must all act to stop this willful destruction. In this urgent conversation, Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson dissect the silent catastrophe facing Gen Z, spiraling anxiety, attention collapse, and social isolation, all amplified by addictive tech. They explore the psychological and spiritual fallout of logarithm-optimized platforms, the gender impact on boys and girls, and what it means to raise children in a virtualized world. Data-driven but deeply human, this is essential viewing for anyone wondering what the hell happened after 2012 and how to fix it. Okay? And in that article, I also linked to Dr. Haidt's story about that's on our website for 2 years that shows what legislation is being passed in states, that gives you sample legislation to pass in your states that say this is the science. Here's a little video by Haidt in there with a question and answer that you can share with legislators, and it basically explains how we stop this, how we fix this. And then I talked to you last week about one of the Supreme Court rulings that said, hey, you know, the Texas law that says porn sites like Pornhub now can be required to have to prove your age before you can use it. The Supreme Court just approved that. That has been how the tech companies have stopped us from stopping children from using social media. Because, oh, porn is terrible? Yeah, watch this video. You have no idea how much worse than porn. And porn is terrible. This is than porn. And we got to stop it. You and I have to stop it. We, the people, have to stop it. Right? So you got to watch this video and then share it with everyone and then click on the link to Dr. Haidt's other video on our website that gives you all the legal documents to show you what Alabama's doing and what Florida did and other states are doing, and push it and push it and push it. Our very future depends on it. We will never have a workforce with what we're doing to their brains before they're preteens. I'm not making it up. I'm not being alarmist. I'm trying to urge you to see the truth and take action, okay? This is a good weekend to do it. This is criminal what they're doing. And if you get a chance, I think I also put a link in it. And if not, I'll make sure I go back in. There's a subsequent interview between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris that is really interesting, that talks about what social media is doing to Elon Musk and to Tucker Carlson and to Megyn Kelly and to Candace Owens and everyone, because the same thing that's hurting kids starts to affect them when their life is on X, when their life is a podcast. My life is not on social media. I do not spend all my time. I tell you, I post on those things. Why did I not know how many viewers we had on TikTok? Why did I have to ask one of my young relatives, hey, is anybody watching this stuff? Because I'm posting things on TikTok to try to inform young people, including I'll be posting this story saying, hey, kids, this is what TikTok's doing to you. But I'm not on it. I don't use the app. Facebook, I post stuff. I don't read the comments. I don't do anything. You've got to protect yourself from this because it's literally dangerous. It's literally hurting you. Okay? Okay. So we're going to wrap up the podcast. As I say in a very podcast, our goal is to tell people about this. Why? Because the more people you tell about this podcast, the more people are going to watch that video. The more people are going to read the story about marijuana. The more people are going to understand the truth. And so I say, send me your comments. If I said something wrong, if I am wrong, I would admit it. We talked about Tucker Carlson last week. So you can write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. We read them. We write back. We want to know if you've got stories that are important that I didn't see, we didn't see, that we should cover, send them to me. We'll include them in the show if we think they're good. A lot of this show is made up by stuff you send me. So it's not just about donating. If you can donate, and I want to thank, there's been some new people coming in, donating $100. Thank you to those people. But to most of you, give $5, $10, $15, $20, $25, $50 a month. That helps us with our cash flow. But it's not just about donating. It's about what? Watching the podcast, getting other people to watch podcasts, and then acting on the things we ask you to act on, like watching this video and acting in your state to save our children and our country, and sharing the marijuana article. And on our podcast page, what do we have? We have a list. We have a list every week. Here's this week's action items. Not a long list, 2 or 3, 4 things that help you protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? So I'm going to wrap up this Independence Day weekend podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will share it. I'm going to be 70 years old tomorrow, and we're going to have a nice family gathering. And I thank God that I'm here because, as you guys know, I had open heart surgery. I had a heart attack a year ago. But for the grace of God go I. I am here thanks to God. I'm thankful to be here, to see my grandchildren, to be with my family, to have lived 70 years. I don't know how much longer God wants me around. Whatever that is, I'll be thankful for each and every day. And I hope you will be thankful for each and every day. Okay? Let's have a great remainder of Independence Day weekend, and let's continue to work and to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. May God bless you, right? God bless all of you. Hopefully, you and I will be back together again next week. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast, and my name is Tom Zawistowski. See you next week.
Can you see
Man, I love that song. I know many of you do. And boy, on Independence Weekend, that song is just awesome. Hey, for those of you who really love this song, if you go to our podcast page at wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the podcast button, there's a link for that video, and you just click it. It'll download to your phone. It'll download to your computer, and you can play it anytime you want. And I got a bunch of people who use it to play for their fireworks. It's awesome. So, if you want the copy of the song, it's on our podcast page. But for those of you who are listening, I have a piece that I put up every week, and sometimes I read it to you. That's a quote from Winston Churchill, because I think it's important. It says, Winston Churchill said this: "If you will not fight for right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory is sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than to live as slaves." I post that because we came very close to that terrible end. If we did not fight when we could fight, if we did not fight, when the odds were against us and we had a precarious chance of survival, which was what was happening when they were putting Jan 6ers in prison, when they were arresting us for our opinions, when they were stealing our property and our money and our rights, when they were doing that, we still fought because we had to. I have another quote that I put on my emails from Winston Churchill that says, "It's not a choice to fight evil. You must fight evil, because it will either kill you now or it will kill you later, but it will surely kill you." We are fighting evil in this world, whether it's Islam, radical Islam, whether it's communism, whether it's just the evil in men and women's hearts to try to rule over other individuals. We are fighting evil, and that's why you listen to this podcast. God bless every one of you. Have a great rest of the weekend. We'll see you next week.